الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، إلها واحدا أحدا فردا صمدا قيوما، نؤمن له بالربوبية ونقر له بالعبودية. من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كأفضل ما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى من تبعهم بإحسان وإيمان إلى قيام يوم الدين. عباد الله، أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل ولزوم أمره. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال: إنما أشكو بثي وحزني إلى الله وأعلم من الله ما لا تعلمون. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. We live in a society that for the most part has developed a widespread addiction to complaining. We notice that either in our own lives or in the lives of those who we interact with, family members, friends, colleagues, classmates, those around us, even people who we interact with on social media, complete strangers, that a lot of complaining happens. It seems like we've become obsessed with complaining, and that when we get together with one another, this is one of the frequent things that ends up happening. There's a famous saying that says, misery loves company. That when we get together, in many cases, when we're facing a challenge or a difficulty or a problem, that we like to admit this and expose this challenge that we're facing, and in turn, it's very easy for us to start up a conversation about, how terrible the weather is. We notice this. Sometimes we might not notice this, but you might go into a store, for instance, right? And you're talking with the person behind the cashier, and you exchange hellos and highs, and sometimes, in many cases, immediately, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, it doesn't matter what the weather is, usually the first person or the first victim of our complaints is the weather. We usually complain that it's either too hot or it's too cold, or it's cloudy or what have you, it's raining, or we try to find a way to we complain about how high gas prices are, right? Or how terrible my teacher is, or my boss is, or how lazy my classmate or co-worker or spouse is, or how bad my child is. And very much like children, many children from early on, they adopt this notion of complaining and whining. We notice this as some children sometimes, right? No matter what you do for the child is always whining, the child is always complaining. And in many cases, the culture that we live in is a culture of complaints, constant complaints, right? It seems like many of us live in eternal unhappiness. Many people wallow in constant negativity. They're always emphasizing on negative things in their lives. They're always complaining about problems in their lives. Although, especially in the society that we live in, a society which emphasizes and provides for us means of instant self-gratification. I don't think any other society in the world provides its citizens with the means of instant self-gratification like we have here in the US and in the society that we live in. But even with all of this, we notice that most people are still what? They're still complaining. They're still unhappy. And they're not afraid to express how unhappy they are. In fact, when we look at how the system of the society that we live in, a society which emphasizes on marketing. Marketing is very big in our society. It's very important in our society. If we look at the purpose of marketing, one of the purposes of marketing is to do what? Is to elicit and to amplify dissatisfaction and discontent. Right? They're showcasing a product, but the essence behind marketing is to show you that what you have is not enough. What you have is not sufficient to make you happy. You have to buy this product in order to be happy. You have to buy this product in order to be satisfied. And the cycle continues. It's a continuous cycle. And so, even in the society that we live in, people are very comfortable expressing their complaints and their dissatisfaction and their discontent. And there are many reasons why people do so. But the essence, I believe, the essence goes back to being discontent and dissatisfied, to having an unthankful and a joyless heart. And the showing negativity and complaining, it's not just about saying something. It's not just about friends getting together and one another complaining to one another. No, there are destructive consequences to this kind of attitude and this kind of lifestyle. We notice, if we ask any individual, even the complainer, even the obsessive complainer, if you ask that person whether they enjoy spending time with a person who complains or not, they'll say no. No one wants to spend time with someone who's constantly complaining, constantly whining, constantly expressing negativity. So one of the destructive consequences of complaining is that relationships, whether it's your spouse, whether it's your parents, whether it's your children, whether it's your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, what begins to happen? Relationships begin to become destroyed. They're destroyed. Because people don't want to have anything to do with those who complain. It also ends up also impacting our mindsets. Having a negative mindset is something destructive. It's destructive. It destroys our psychology and our being. When we're constantly focusing on negative things, when we're constantly complaining and whining about our problems and the challenges that we face in life. They have, if you ask psychologists, they'll tell you that constant complaints have a destructive consequence and impact on our minds. And so it's important for us to think about what we can do and how we can live our lives where we try to minimize the amount of complaints. And here, when I'm emphasizing issues of complaints, not stating issues as a matter of fact. Because sometimes if you're sick, you tell people you're sick. You're stating a matter of fact. You're not necessarily complaining. There's a difference. There's a difference between stating that the weather is very cold, it's freezing, or it's very hot, in order to tell someone to make sure they bundle up, they take extra clothes, or they take sunscreen with them, or protect themselves from this sort of weather, stating it as a matter of fact, and whether you're complaining because it's too hot, or you're complaining because it's too cold, or what have you. There's a difference. Here we're talking about how we can minimize complaining and negativity. Minimize focusing on negativity, focusing on our problems and our challenges. And today I'd like to go over just a few solutions or things that help us in our day-to-day lives when it comes to avoiding complaining. Because we may not necessarily be able to completely abstain from complaining in our lives, but there are certain things that we can do where we can minimize this, and in turn minimize the destructive consequences of such a mindset. One, brothers and sisters, is to complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only. To complain to God only. In chapter number 12, Surah Yusuf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, He relates to us the story of Yusuf and his father Yaqub. We all know that Yusuf was very dear and near to Yaqub's heart. He loved him very much. And what happened to Yusuf did what? It broke his father's heart. In fact, the Quran says that he was so sad that what? وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْحُزْنِ, that he lost his sight because he was so sad, because he would weep for his son Yusuf, that he lost his sight. He was not able to see anymore. But with all of the distress, with all of the problems that face, Allah also tells us that what? That Yaqub alayhi salam was able to control. He was able to control himself. وَهُوَ al-Kadhim. Yes, he felt pain, but he was able to control his pain. And then he did what? When his brothers, when Yusuf's brothers, Yaqub's sons, they came and they informed him and they told him, he expressed his discontent, his discomfort, and they told him, listen, you're crying so much over our brother Yusuf to the point where you're going to kill yourself. You're going to cause problems for yourself. Allah relates, He says that Yaqub, he said to them what? He said to them, قَالَ إِنَّمَا أَشْكُو بَثِّي وَحُزْنِي إِلَى اللَّهِ. I'm not complaining to you. The only person that I complain to about my problems, about this problem, is whom? Is God. In Dua Kumail, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he tells us very beautifully. He says, إِلَهِي وَرَبِّي مَنْ لِي غَيْرُكَ أَسْأَلُهُ كَشْفَ ضُرِّي وَالنَّظَرَ فِي أَمْرِي. My Lord, my God, who do I have other than you to complain to? Everyone has problems. No one lives in this life without problems, without challenges. Here, Imam Ali alayhi salam, he teaches us, he says that the source that we should go to, the person that we should go to when it comes to complaining about our problems is whom? Is Allah. مَنْ لِي غَيْرُكَ. Who do I have other than you? أَسْأَلُهُ كَشْفَ ضُرِّي وَالنَّظَرَ فِي أَمْرِي. Why? Why is it that we go to God? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can fix the situation. Because Allah is able to find a solution. Allah is able to fix this problem and this challenge that I'm facing. And this is why. So it's important, brothers and sisters, that the first and foremost thing that we keep in mind is that if we encounter problems and we feel like we want to complain, we do so to whom? To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is one. Another is that if we find it imperative to complain to people, because in the end we are social beings too. We have relationships with our parents, with our spouses, with our children, with friends, and we talk with one another. So it's inevitable that sometimes we may discuss issues that we're facing, challenges that we're facing. If we find it imperative for us to complain to others, we should only do so when what? When complaining is beneficial. When that person is able to help me in finding a solution to my problem. Not just for the sake of complaining. Not just to complain to someone, but when I know that that individual has the power and the ability to help me overcome this problem. And in fact, it is this, exactly this, which is considered in jurisprudence, in fiqh, in Islamic law, is considered one of the exceptions to backbiting, to ghibah. Our scholars, they tell us that one of the exceptions to backbiting is when you speak to someone about an injustice that occurred to you. When someone has taken away something that belongs to you, a right that belongs to you, right? Someone has encroached upon your rights, has taken away something that belongs to you. You are able to speak about what that person did behind that person's back, under the condition that the person who you are talking to can find a solution. Not just to complain, not just to expose this person and say this person hurt me in this way, but that person that you are speaking to can actually find a solution. he can go and he can take back your rights, he can help you find a solution to the problem. So this is number 2. And this, in fact, is not necessarily complaining. This is, more accurately, it's considered venting. There's a difference. There's a difference between venting and between complaining. Venting is when you talk to someone about the problem and you get it off your chest, which is something good, to get it off your chest, and that's it. You forget about it. You don't think about it anymore. The solution is found and you don't think about it anymore. Complaining is what? Is something that's recurring. You say this to someone, but then you go to the second person and you complain, and then the third person and you complain. It's a mindset. You're constantly wallowing in negativity. Whereas venting is doing what? Is getting it off your chest, and that's it. You don't think about it anymore. Right? This is number 2. Number 3 is that instead of complaining, perhaps we should focus on finding practical solutions to our problem. Right? Some people, again, they complain for the sake of complaining. But if they were to spend the time and the effort, right, that they spend on complaining, if they were to spend this time on finding solutions to their problems, many of their complaints would vanish. Many of the sources of their complaints would vanish. People, for instance, complain about how difficult a class is or how difficult these exams are. Well, instead of spending time complaining, hit the books, study, and you'll overcome the problem. People complain, for instance, about not being able to sleep, insomnia. I see this a lot on social media. Young people, unfortunately, complaining. They're up at 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're complaining, I can't sleep. Well, turn off your phone. Turn off your phone, put it aside at bedtime, and you'll fall asleep like a baby. So instead of spending time complaining and effort complaining, we should instead focus on trying to find practical solutions to our problems. And in doing so, we overcome the source of the complaints. Because positivity, brothers and sisters, unfortunately, sometimes some people look at positivity as being something unrealistic. For a person to be positive, they believe that a person who is positive is someone who completely neglects any problems, any challenges. Someone who doesn't even, look at challenges, who, decides to turn their head away and not even face any challenges or run away from challenges. But this is not what positivity is. Positivity, the essence of positivity, is for us to make a conscious decision that we focus on something more productive and more useful. That we focus on a solution instead of just the problem. This is the essence of positivity. This is number 3. And number 4, brothers and sisters, which I believe is very important for our development in our lives, is that we should always remember those who are less fortunate. Always. Always remember those who are less fortunate, and at the same time remember God's bounties and blessings upon us. In every scenario, in every case, there is always someone who is worse off than I am. Always. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what challenge or what problem I'm facing. There's always someone who is worse off, who is facing more challenges and more difficult challenges and problems. In fact, if we take the time to think about our blessings, to think about the bounties of God upon us, we will notice that we are immensely blessed. We really are. I was reading about statistics regarding people's livelihoods, their lifestyles, how they live across the world. And many of you have read this yourself. You have maybe heard me or others talk about this. Brothers and sisters, if we examine our lives, we will notice that we are far better off than the vast majority of people on the face of this earth. If we have a fridge, if we own a fridge, and there's food inside this fridge, if we have clothes on our back, if we have a roof over our head, if we have a bed to sleep in, just by having these things, we are better off than 75% of the entire global population. 75% is more than 5 billion people. More than 5 billion people. There's a website that I came across recently called Giving What We Can. GivingWhatWeCan.org. You can take a look at it. They have this small calculator where you input, the country that you live in, how much you make, your household size, and it'll tell you how far better off you are than the rest of the world, in what percentage you are. And go and calculate for yourself. Go and calculate for yourself, and you can see how you personally are better off than the rest of the global population. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا. If you try to count and enumerate the blessings of God upon you, you'll fail. You won't be able to. But we just have to take the time to think, to recognize the bounties and the blessings of Allah upon us. In another verse, Allah says what? Allah says, وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكُمْ لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. And your Lord makes a promise, a guarantee, that if you show thanks, if you express thanks for the blessings that you've been given, He'll do what? He'll give you more. And when God gives you more, then this in itself is a solution. Allah is solving your problems when Allah gives us more blessings. This is number 4. And finally, number 5, brothers and sisters, is to practically avoid complaining. To challenge yourself. Some people, they do 24-hour challenges, right? To promise yourself or to engage in a 24-hour challenge where you say, from now until tomorrow, exactly 24 hours, I will not complain once. To actually do so. And you'll notice that if you are able to do so, many times you might end up wanting to complain, but then you'll forget, you'll stop, you'll remember, and you can think of one of the blessings that Allah has given. Or to change your mind, think about something else. And if you're able to do this just for 24 hours, you'll notice the great change in your own life. To actually avoid doing so. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the capacity to increase in our hearts and minds faith and recognition of His blessings and bounties upon us. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal-'asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق يظهره على الدين كله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وترحم على محمد وآل محمد كأفضل ما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. وصل اللهم وسلم على أوصيائه وخلفائه وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى علي أمير المؤمنين وقائد الغر المحجلين وعلى البضعة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وإمامي الهدى الحسن والحسين سيدي شباب أهل الجنة وعلى أئمة المسلمين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه. عباد الله أوصيكم ونفسي بتقوى الله عز وجل ولزوم أمره. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الذين ينفقون في السراء والضراء والكاظمين الغيظ والعافين عن الناس والله يحب المحسنين. آمنا بالله. صدق الله العلي العظيم. The 25th of the month of Rajab marks the commemoration of the martyrdom of the seventh Imam of Ahlul Bayt, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim alayhi salam. And when we examine history and we examine the time of the Imams, we notice that the time in which this Imam lived in, and his father, Imam al-Sadiq, but especially the time of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, was a time of severe repression, that a lot of persecution was going on, especially directed towards the Ahlul Bayt, the household of the Prophet, the descendants of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And this was done at the hands of the Abbasi rulers who came to power, who took over from the Umayyads and came into power, took over power. A lot of persecution and repression occurred at their hands. If we go back to books of history, they give us details of unspeakable acts that were committed, of atrocities that were committed, of mass killings that occurred. Why? Because people were the descendants of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, or the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. And the Imam himself, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far himself, historians tell us that for about a third of his life, about 20 years, he spent either in prison or under house arrest or in the dungeons of the Abbasis. For almost 20 years. The Imam was born in the year 128 after Hijrah. He died in the year 183 at the age of 55. He became the Imam at 20 years of age when his father, Imam al-Sadiq, passed away. And so he was the Imam for 35 years, the longest period of time for any of the Imams, for their Imam. But during this time, he spent about 20 years of his life in the prisons. But yet, he was still able to overcome the challenges and the problems that he faced, he and his followers faced, with patience and perseverance. And it's very difficult, if we think about it, to be in such a situation, to be incarcerated for 20 years, to be under severe financial restraints, to be under house arrest, not given access to the public, to be watched constantly. This is a very difficult life to live. It's not easy. We take this for granted. Many of us, we haven't experienced persecution or imprisonment or incarceration or any of that in our lives. Alhamdulillah, this is a great blessing. Many of us, especially those who grow up, I say this about myself, those who grow up in the society that we live in. We live in safety, relative safety and stability. And so we take many of these things for granted. It's very difficult for a society and an individual to live under repression and under persecution. But yet when we examine the life of the Imams, and especially Imam al-Kadhim, we notice that he was able to live his life in what? In patience and perseverance. He overcame the challenges that he faced in his life. And the Imam's life is filled with many instances of patience and perseverance. But today, just for a few moments, I want to highlight one of the traits of the Imams. The Imam is known as Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. This was one of the most famous attributes that the Imam possessed, al-Kadhim, which means what? Which means the one who was merciful, the one who was clement, who showed clemency, the one who was forgiving towards others, the ones who suppressed his anger. Because if we examine the life of the Imam, we notice that he was the victim of humiliation and abuse by not only the ruling class, but even those around him. Many people who would humiliate the Imam when they would see him. But yet the Imam was able to do what? The Imam was able to repel these evil actions with goodness, just like the Quran says. The Quran says, "Idfa' billati hiya ahsan." Repel evil with what? With that which is better. With kindness, with generosity, with goodness, with good character. This is what the Quran teaches us. And this is a great lesson for us, brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, many of us, when we are insulted, when we are humiliated, when our faith or religion is humiliated, we end up doing what? We end up returning the favor. Many return the favor. They also act with evil or disrespect towards others. The Quran teaches us the exact opposite. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Idfa' billati hiya ahsan." Repel evil with that which is better. And this was how the Imam lived his life. It's mentioned, there are many instances, but in one instance it's mentioned that there was a man specifically known, every time he would see the Imam in Medina, every time he would see him, he would curse. He would curse at him. He would humiliate him. He would verbally abuse the Imam. And many times the Imam's companions, his close friends and followers, they asked the Imam for permission in order to punish the man who would revile the Imam, who would humiliate him. But the Imam would not allow them. It's said that one day the Imam, he passed by where this man lived, the farm in which he lived. He went, he entered, he directly approached the man, and he began to speak to the man very beautifully. He began to conversate, he spoke with him humorously. The man was in shock. You know, this is the person that I'm constantly humiliating, I'm abusing him every chance that I get. And he's speaking to me in this very beautiful and kind manner. The Imam, the narration tells us that the Imam, he asked the man, he said, "How much have you spent on your farm?" The man reluctantly, he told him, "I spent 100 dirhams." The Imam then asked him, he told him, "How much do you expect to gain from the produce?" The man, he told him, also 100 dirhams. The narration says that the Imam, he put his hand in his pocket, he took out some money, and he gave the man money which was more than enough of what he had spent and what he expected to receive. The man opened the bag, he saw, the hadith says 300 dinars, which are gold coins, were given to this man by the Imam. The man opened this bag and he noticed this and he recognized, he was very shameful because he noticed the kindness and the generosity and the akhlaq, the noble akhlaq of this man who he would constantly revile and abuse. And after that, he began to respect the Imam. After that, he spent time communicating with the Imam, learning from the Imam, developing a strong relationship with the Imam. This is how the Imam used to deal with people. The narration says that the Imam, then he went to his companions and he told them, which solution is better, your solution or my solution? The Quran says, "Idfa' billati hiya ahsan." If someone hurts you, if someone humiliates you, show kindness to them. Show respect to them. Why? It's not a weakness. Some people, they think that it's a weakness. It's not a weakness because what you're doing is in fact you're expressing your own values, the values that you believe in. If you go ahead and return the favor by disrespecting someone, this doesn't say anything about that person. It says something about you. If someone disrespects me, it doesn't say something about me. It says something about that person. And so when we act with kindness and tolerance and forgiveness and mercy towards others, this shows the characteristics and the attributes and the values that we believe in and that we have learned. The Imam, he gives us advice, and I'll end with this. He says in the hadith that if one day a person comes to you in one ear and he insults you, and then immediately he turns around, he comes to your other ear and he seeks forgiveness, accept this forgiveness from him. Accept this forgiveness. Many ahadith, they say that you should not even wait for someone to apologize. You should show kindness and respect. It's not an easy thing. It's easy to say it, but it's not easy to live this. It's not easy to actually apply these values, but this is what we learn from our imams, because this is how they live their lives. This wasn't just theory. This wasn't the Imam just teaching us something that he had never practiced or thought of practicing. No, this was how the Imams, they lived their lives every single day. But yet history tells us that such individuals, they were the victims of the oppression and the injustice of the ruling class of others. To the point where Harun, He could not stand. He could not stand the popularity of the Imam, of people coming to him and learning from him. So in one of his journeys to Medina, he entered the Prophet's mosque. He saw that the Imam was praying. In the middle of prayers, historians, they tell us that he ordered his guards to go and to capture the Imam, to incarcerate the Imam, and he was sent to Basra in a jail, and then he was taken out to Baghdad in another jail, in another prison, and taken out into a third prison, all the way until he ended up in the dungeon of the brutal person by the name of As-Sindi ibn Shahid, who was known for his brutality and his cruelty. And so he was taken to that prison, and there he was bothered very much by this individual until Harun decided that to put an end to the life of the Imam. And so history tells us that the Imam was poisoned, and on the 25th of the month of Rajab in the year 183, the Imam attained martyrdom. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, to forgive our sins and shortcomings. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the capacity to learn from our Imams and from our role models and leaders of the Ahlul Bayt, and to try to implement some of the lessons that we learned from their lives. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us their shafa'ah and their ziyarah, their visitation in this life and their intercession in the next life. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Wal asr, inna al-insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. قوموا إلى صلاتكم يرحمكم الله.